Okay, so obviously we've been taking a look at the Switch 2 reveal stream in considerable depth, and Oliver's done the legwork here. We've got a range of comparisons here, comparisons with the PS4, which I think is a natural comparison, right? Obviously, the generational leap versus Switch 1, and we've also got some further impressions on third-party games. Let's kick off, Oliver, by talking about your PlayStation 4 comparisons because, fascinating stuff, right?
Yeah, I think this is actually the most natural point of comparison. You'd think the Switch 1 would be, but I actually think the PS4 seems like a very natural point of comparison for the Switch 2. And that becomes especially clear when we look at some of these big heavy hitters that are arriving early on the platform here. The first game that I wanted to highlight here is Final Fantasy VII Remake. And here we actually see a really big difference between the two versions in this one shot that I have. The Switch 2 release has much denser volumetric lighting, and it has a totally different lighting setup on Cloud's face and body. It's more of kind of a 3-point lighting setup with a bit of a 3-dimensional look to it, a bit of a strong edge light, key light, whatever. It looks quite good there. But I think the key thing here, and the reason why this looks so different across platforms, is because the Switch 2 version is running the Intergrade version, which has the Intergrade lighting changes, which were quite numerous. So I think it does appear more visually pleasing on Switch 2, but it's not like for like. And then in this scene, the second scene I've put together, if we flip back and forth between Switch 2 and PS4 here, they do look very similar, but there's not a whole lot of tweakables in this shot that would be super obvious if they'd changed some setting here or there with foliage, with draw distance, with shadows, things like that. So I'm satisfied basically in these shots that the presentation is, PS4 level or thereabouts, but plus these integrated lighting changes, which are quite nice. But the resolution counts here come in at 1080p, which is the same as the PS4 version. So broadly speaking, quite comparable to PS4, if not actually a little bit of a favorable experience relative to PS4 because of those changes. Next up, we have Hogwarts Legacy. And we have one shot in the trailer that's replicable easily on PS4 here in the dining hall. And it does look somewhat similar. Image quality, though, curiously, does appear to be better. And here we have a press asset to look at, which is presumably a pretty high quality asset. It's sharper than the PS4. It's less aliased than the PS4. The character of the image breakup overall, I would say, is quite a bit less obtrusive than PS4. It's actually quite a big improvement on the whole. And it's rendering at about 720p in our shots, curiously enough. The PS4 version is actually at 900p here, with FSR1 upscaling, at least going back to my coverage from 2 years ago. That's what I discovered there. But interestingly, it looks a lot better than PS4 here. So presumably there's some kind of, temporal upsampling process maybe here, some kind of different TAA that's in use possibly, something different going on here that's producing, in the end, a markedly better result than PS4 with its own process. In other scenes, we do see a bit more breakup, a little bit more of that nastiness, but at least in stills, it's resolving a nicer image than PS4. Finally, I looked at Elden Ring. This is a bit less exciting than the other two, perhaps, and the only shot I was able to replicate really at all was just this one shot from the trailer where I had to pause the image here. But here you can see the shadows appear to draw further into the distance on the trees in that midfield there. It's not a huge difference. It is the same scene, but it's not a huge difference, but it is nice to see. Now, I can't really judge image quality here. The image looks quite soft on Switch 2, unfortunately, because it's a YouTube rip, right? This is not a press asset. Unfortunately, we didn't get press assets for everything. But again, this is like presumably pretty comparable to PS4. The resolution is very, comparable to PS4 at 1080p here. So that is a good sign to see there. Certainly that at least the settings there appear to be very similar, if not even a little bit better in that limited respect. Again, this is a very limited slice of footage, but that's what it appears to be at the moment with this particular title. So overall, I think the Switch 2 is doing a pretty great job of turning in PS4 level visuals. Again, possibly with other upgrades and loading times, other upgrades when it comes to more modern titles that are pushing out more advanced rendering technologies. But this is a pretty good showing for Switch 2 so far in these PS4 class titles. I think that's probably what you can expect is a PS4 level experience.
Yeah, I noticed on Hogwarts that there was some inconsistent frame pacing and some stutter.
Oh dear.
Traversal.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's a weird
though.
thing in the asset there where there's some broomstick action at the end there that seems to be, the frame rate seems to be running unlocked in the 40s. That was kind of a bit baffling. Elden Ring performance is basically, as we said in the direct, it's a bit of a mystery because that asset looked awful. The judder was just outrageously bad. However, the actual frame rate metrics are good, which makes us think that they took a 60 FPS capture and then just decimated it down to 30 FPS, which was then put back into a 60 FPS container. It could be inconsistent frame pacing like PS4. It could be running unlocked. We just don't know. Based on that, we're going to need to see the actual game or a better asset. I can't imagine it presents like that, though.
I'd hope not.
That would be surprising. And yeah, as we said in the direct special, Final Fantasy actually runs with a pretty decent performance, but inconsistent 30 FPS cap there, so you get some frame pacing issues. Alex, I'm curious what you think about this.
Well, there's a couple things. One thing that I would definitely want to mention regarding developers re-releasing games on Switch 2 is I think we're going to be looking at something broadly comparable to a PS4 in a lot of ways and better in a number. But one thing that a re-release to the Switch 2 allows the developer to do is to rethink decisions they made before. We've seen this multiple times in the past. John made a video covering Alien Isolation on the original Switch where this came out much later than the original game. And since then, the industry had invented TAA in its modern form. And so that really helped out the game versus the image quality, even at a lower resolution. So like what Oliver said with regards to the Hogwarts game, that could be one of the things they could have changed, an entirely different image treatment to improve that. Another thing that you could see is that like just general graphical things. We've seen it in where depending upon the version that they're porting from as a base, that can affect the entire graphical presentation of the game and have it be more look like one version of the game than versus other. You just mentioned Intergrade, but it happens pretty often that we see games that use their PC base instead of their console base for ports to new platforms, and then they inherit all the qualities of that. There's a lot of bad historical examples, but there's also good historical examples of that. So it's not always going to be some things are down to the hardware being better, but sometimes it's down to developers using new versions of game. And also there's a bit of oversight in here. Like some stuff like just slips in. So if you see things that are negative too, you always have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, other things to bear in mind when we're talking about sort of PS4 class performance. First of all, I mean, we kind of said the same thing when we first saw the Switch 1. This is kind of like Xbox 360 class GPU performance, and it kind of was. But at the same time, the miracles that developers came up with over the life cycle of the Switch, it is just, that you can't really underestimate the importance of developers writing for a specific piece of hardware, tapping into its features. We did an interview on Digital Foundry at Eurogamer with Rebellion, and they're talking about some of the techniques they use to get the most out of that GPU. And similarly, as Alex said earlier, the concept that it is a modern GPU, it's got all of the modern features, ray tracing support, mesh shaders, everything that a 30 series class NVIDIA card, this can do just with a much lower level of overall performance. But yeah, certainly as a kind of first generation ballpark, so to speak, PS4 is a very good comparison point, I think.